that I think the ACC got cheated a little bit by the fact that Tara Vanderveer decided to retire before she joined the ACC.
Oh, for sure. That was a little disappointing to hear yesterday. Tara's a legend and one of the greatest of all time, one of the greatest coaches of all time, 3 national championships, over 1,200 wins. There was a little part of me that thought, look, she's been in the Pac-12 her whole career. She's on the tail end of her career. She's losing Cam Brink to the WNBA draft. Is she going to want to travel to Winston-Salem on a Thursday night? I'm not sure. So I did have that in the back of my mind, but, she hadn't said anything, and so we really weren't sure. But so it kind of makes sense when you look at it from that perspective. She did have a quote saying, part of me wanted to stay and compete in the ACC because it is the best women's basketball conference in the country, but I think it was probably just time for her, and so I understand it. I totally get it, but you're right. Definitely a bummer, as for me personally, too, as someone who covers the ACC.
Stanford, Cal, SMU, the newest members of the ACC coming next year. Trying to put a bow on this past season with us here, Kelly, and it clearly, again, it's been more about the exposure about the women's game this season than more before, and I just got done talking about golf creating unicorns and whatnot and how they're having the challenges. With the more exposure of the women's game, the unicorns have kind of come to the front to where it's almost unfair to call a lot of these players. Obviously, Caitlin Clark is the prime example. Angel Reese had a lot of that love last year, but you just mentioned Cam Brink. We have J.C. Sheldon out of Ohio State, Alyssa Peely of Utah, Aaliyah Edwards at UConn, right? I mean, this list goes on and on and on to where more and more of these women are becoming household names and are able to turn that into, not just exposure for the sport, but all of a sudden they find themselves being the newest and maybe freshest ambassadors to maybe take the professional game in the United States to a new level.
Yes, they do. And there's a lot of big names entering the WNBA this class. I mean, you could argue this is the biggest class and kind of the class with the most star power that we've ever seen. I go back to, I believe it was 2013 when you had Griner, Elena Deladon, and Skylar Diggins. That was a really big class. But this one, I think with Caitlin Clark, it's going to be unparalleled, and we talk, I know you were mentioning it with golf, and the whole drama with golf constantly is who's the next Tiger, right? Who's the next Tiger? And there will probably never be another Tiger. But for women's basketball, I think Caitlin Clark is the Tiger in a lot of respects. She's someone who's going to take the sport to new heights that we've never seen before. She's a winner. She's phenomenal. She plays the game in a different way. Like I think it's a fair comparison. And then you're seeing the ratings, right? Golf really took off from a ratings perspective once Tiger started doing his thing, and we're seeing ratings that are just flat out unbelievable. To go from 5 million people watching the national title 2 years ago to this year 18.7 million, it's just hard to fathom. And yes, part of it is just the growth of the game and the exposure, and I totally agree with you on that. But part of it is Caitlin Clark, and she's unreal. And I think we're going to see ratings records broken in the W as well. And it will be because the sport is growing and all that, but it will also be because of Caitlin Clark.
ACC Network college basketball analyst Kelly Gramlich joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. I am Paul Eihander. As we put a little bit of a bow on the college basketball season, we saw Kenny Brooks at Virginia Tech, specifically to the ACC, leave to go to Kentucky. Megan Duffy slides into the Virginia Tech spot. Kenny Brooks was willing to go to Kentucky, but it seems like on the men's side, no one seems to want that job, at least initially. What is the issue with Kentucky? Why did Kenny Brooks say yes, but why is Scott Drew saying no?
That's a great question. I think for Kenny Brooks, and I know Kenny well, and I think the world of him. I think what he did at Virginia Tech is remarkable. I think he just kind of wanted a new challenge. And in women's basketball specifically, we talk about this with football and with men's basketball of who has the NIL, that kind of thing. Well, even your middle-of-the-pack NIL funds for football and men's basketball are still pretty high. Your middle-of-the-pack NIL funds for women's basketball compared to your top NIL funds, there's a big difference. And so I believe, I don't know for sure, but I believe he was going to have more NIL money at Kentucky. And, of course, Liz Kitley was graduating and moving on, who has built that program with him. Georgia Amore followed him. So I think that's part of it. And then Kentucky just built a brand new women's only basketball facility, which is going to be very exciting. Seems like there's a lot of money being put in there. So I think a lot of it was about money and resources. When it comes to the men's side, I view the Kentucky men's job kind of similarly to the Tennessee women's job, which Tennessee, from the reporting I've seen, their top 3 candidates all turned them down. Because at Tennessee, you get fired for going to the Sweet 16.
Right.
At Kentucky, you get fired for, I know they lost in the first round, but you get fired for really good seasons. So I think that's part of it. And then you're also seeing coaches who have been able to carve out success at a certain spot that are just happy there. I mean, I think we've all come to realize that if you have the support of the administration and you have adequate funds, maybe making $1 million more just isn't really worth it, especially in this climate. So there's a lot going into it, but I think the Tennessee women's situation, if you want to look at it through that lens, it's kind of similar to the Kentucky men.
ACC Network college basketball analyst, also for ESPN, Kelly Gramlich, joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. I want to ask you about what's happening with the transfer portal. Clearly, it's always going to be something that will have to crop up, especially in the offseason moving forward, and certainly with NIL opportunities that you just mentioned. At North Carolina, Courtney Banghart has lost roughly half of her team. If you have her ear right now and you can grab her by the ear, what do you need to tell her to get things going again?
Oh, man. Well, I wouldn't tell anybody how to do their job in this transfer portal era because it seems awful, frankly. I mean, just to go back to your example, we had Calipari take the Arkansas job, and he said, I met with the team, there is no team, which is just crazy. I mean, it used to be you took a new job and you had a roster. Maybe it wasn't the talent level you wanted because you're trying to rebuild, but you at least had players. And I think what we're seeing with UNC, you had some people that had some injuries that I think when you've been injured multiple times, you're probably not happy where you are just because of that mainly. So you had a player like Paulina Paris leave and go to Arizona, and some other players like that, a Key who'd been injured her whole career basically. The Deja Kelly, Alyssa Usby, and Usby's not in the portal. I think Usby will come back. Haven't heard that announced, but I think she will. And then Deja Kelly in the portal, I think we're just seeing that, right? We're seeing, okay, I've spent 4 years here. I would be going pro in any other situation. But because I have this COVID year, maybe I'll take a look around and see what's out there. I can very much understand that. A few of the other ones, I think you're just going to have some attrition. But, yeah, it does seem to be an issue. And UNC, I thought they really underachieved this year. They are so talented. I thought that roster was so talented. And for whatever reason, I don't know, about the internal workings, but I felt like they underachieved. And so maybe some players just looking for a fresh start. But I know she's bringing in a good class. She's been recruiting like crazy. I guess the main thing I would tell her would be make sure you keep Alyssa Usby and do your best to keep Deja Kelly. That would be my advice, but I'm sure she doesn't need my advice. I don't know anything about coaching in this transfer portal world.
Well, I asked, and you answered, and I appreciate that. ACC Network college basketball analyst Kelly Gramlich. Kelly, before I let you go, Westmore and the Wolfpack women, their chances of running it back next year, Sweet 16 and deeper.
Sweet 16, I would say a good chance, because they bring back Sanaya Rivers and Isaiah James, who I think will end up being one of the best backcourts in the country next season. It really depends what they do inside. I know they have some young post players they're excited about. They also are bringing in Zam Jones, who's a big-time McDonald's All-American, but she's a guard. So how can they replenish their front court, losing Baldwin and Mimi Collins? They have the guard play, but they just need – and they don't necessarily need superstars in that inside, but they need some solid post players, so whether that's their young players or the portal. But if they get that, then definitely. I think NC State, bare minimum, their expectations every year should be the Sweet 16 with the program that Westmore has built. And then if you get hot and you get a good draw, you have what happened this year with the Final Four. But just so impressed with Westmore and what he's built there at NC State. And I'm glad he's staying at NC State. I thought perhaps Tennessee was going to come calling and maybe talk to him, but sounds like he is good to go to stay in Raleigh, and I think that's good news for everybody.
Kelly, appreciate the insight as always. Have a great spring. Enjoy a little bit of the time off, even though, it really never ends, does it?
No, it doesn't. But thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. ACC Network and ESPN college basketball analyst Kelly Gramlich here on the Adam Gold Show.